Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point in life when you get tired of the confusion, the inconsistency, the moments where you're giving everything and still feeling like it's not enough. And it's in that moment, when the noise fades, when the waiting ends, when you stop reaching for someone who keeps slipping away, that you realize something powerful. You've never actually needed them to choose you. What you've needed all along was the courage to choose yourself. Today, I want to talk to the part of you that's exhausted from overgiving, to the part that's been second, guessing your worth. Because the moment you stop looking outward for validation and start turning inward with love, that's the moment your real growth begins. Let's talk about what happens when you choose yourself, not as a last resort, but as a beginning. There is something incredibly powerful about silence. It's not loud, not attention-seeking, not dramatic, but it says everything. In a world where so many people speak just to be heard, silence becomes a rare and commanding force. When someone chooses not to react, not to explain, not to defend themselves over and over again, it's not because they're weak, it's because they've evolved beyond the need to prove their worth. Silence often gets misunderstood. Some call it manipulation, others see it as immaturity or avoidance, but silence used the right way isn't about playing games. It's not about trying to get a reaction or withholding yourself to control someone else. It's about standing still long enough to realize what's worth your voice, and what never deserved it to begin with. When someone has hurt you, disrespected you, or taken you for granted, the immediate reaction is often to speak. We want to explain how we feel. We want them to understand how their actions affected us. We want closure, clarity, or even revenge. But most of the time, that desire comes from a place of pain, not power. And often, the more we speak, the more we give away our peace. We get pulled into arguments that go in circles. We hear excuses that don't heal. We open ourselves to more disappointment when the other person still doesn't respond the way we hope they will. But silence is different. Silence gives you space. It allows emotions to settle and your perspective to sharpen. It removes you from chaos and places you in clarity. It's in silence that you stop asking why someone did what they did and start asking yourself what you truly deserve. Silence teaches you to let go, not because they apologized, not because they changed, but because you're done waiting for either. Silence is not an act of punishment, it's an act of peace. It's the moment you stop investing in someone else's behavior and start investing in your healing. When you stay quiet, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you no longer need to, that's power. You no longer crave their validation. You no longer chase their attention. You simply step back and allow things to reveal themselves. The truth always shows up in the silence. People reveal who they are not in their promises, but in their actions, especially when you're no longer responding. The person who truly cares will feel your absence and reflect. The one who never valued you will just fade away, and that alone answers everything you've been asking. There's a quiet confidence in not responding. It's the kind of strength that comes from knowing you are enough, regardless of whether someone sees it or not. You stop begging to be seen. You stop fighting to be understood. You realize that anyone who truly values you would never put you in a position where you have to fight for basic respect in the first place. Silence is the boundary that doesn't require explanation. It's the line you draw without drama or blame. You simply shift your energy inward. You start focusing on what brings you peace instead of what keeps you anxious. And the more you protect that silence, the more you'll notice how your world starts to change. You begin to attract people who understand you without needing long explanations. You start making decisions that come from a place of calm rather than desperation. You find that not everything needs a response, and not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Most of all, silence allows you to remember who you are without the noise, without the confusion, without the constant push and pull of someone else's inconsistency. You return to yourself, and in doing so, you build a version of you that no longer feels the need to chase closure, validation, or attention. People might not understand your silence at first. Some might accuse you of being cold. Some might try to provoke a reaction just to pull you back into a dynamic you've outgrown, but your silence isn't about them, it's about you. It's about your peace, your worth, your healing. And one day, someone will look at your silence and realize it wasn't anger, it wasn't ego, it wasn't punishment, it was growth, because silence isn't the absence of a response, it is the response, and the most powerful one you'll ever give. We often think of attention as something small, something passive, a quick reply, a phone call, a double tap, a glance, but attention is not small. It's a form of emotional currency, and just like money, where you choose to spend it reveals what you value, and how much you value yourself. When you give someone your attention, you're giving them access to your mind, your energy, your time. You're offering them space in your thoughts and in your emotional world. It may not feel like a big deal in the moment, but over time, where your attention flows, your emotional investment grows. And not everyone is worthy of that investment. We don't talk enough about how draining it is to pour attention into someone who gives very little in return. Whether it's someone who only reaches out when they're bored, or someone who keeps you dangling just enough to hold your interest but never shows up fully. It all costs you something. Every unanswered message, every ignored gesture, every time you replay a conversation in your head trying to make sense of it, that's your emotional currency being spent, and yet so many people keep handing out their attention like it's unlimited. They stay available, they respond instantly, they initiate every conversation, they go out of their way to stay present in someone's life, even when that presence isn't valued, and slowly, that kind of unbalanced investment becomes exhausting. You're constantly giving, hoping they'll eventually see how much you care, how much effort you're making, how deeply you're trying, but attention given to the wrong person doesn't create connection. It creates dependency. It creates a loop where the more you give, the more you crave something in return. And if that person is emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or simply uninterested in meeting you halfway, you'll always end up feeling depleted. When someone knows they have your attention no matter what they do or don't do, it creates comfort without commitment. They don't have to show up fully. They don't have to be consistent. They don't have to treat you well. Because you're there anyway, you reply anyway, you try anyway, that's where boundaries come in. When you begin to recognize your attention as emotional currency, you start to spend it more wisely. You ask better questions. Does this person make me feel seen? Do I feel emotionally safe here? Are my needs being respected, or am I just trying to keep the connection alive at any cost? Suddenly, you realize that giving someone your time isn't a small gesture. It's a gift, and if someone consistently shows you that they don't value that gift, it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to redirect it. People will often value your attention more when it's no longer freely available. When you stop replying instantly, when you stop initiating every conversation, when you stop performing for someone who isn't clapping, not because you're trying to manipulate them, but because you've decided that your energy deserves to go where it's respected. It's easy to believe that if you give more, love harder, stay longer, that maybe they'll come around. Maybe they'll finally understand how much you care. But love isn't proven through sacrifice. It's proven through mutual effort. When both people protect each other's emotional energy, when both value the space they take up in each other's lives, that's when real connection forms. Attention shouldn't be a reward for inconsistency. It shouldn't be handed out to anyone who shows up only when it's convenient for them. You're not a backup plan, you're not an option, and you're not here to spend your emotional currency on someone who's unwilling to invest theirs. The moment you realize your attention is valuable, everything changes. You become more mindful of who gets to access you. You no longer chase, you observe. You no longer beg for effort, you match it. You learn to walk away not to punish them, but to protect your peace. And as you do, something incredible happens. You begin attracting people who treat your attention like the rare, precious thing it is. People who don't just take, but give back. People who recognize that real connection isn't built on convenience, it's built on consistency and care. Because at the end of the day, where you place your attention is a reflection of what you believe you deserve, and you deserve to spend it where it brings you value, respect, and emotional return. There's something quietly transformative about stepping back. It's not loud, it doesn't demand answers, it doesn't come with announcements, it simply happens. One moment you're fully present, texting, calling, trying, hoping, and the next you start pulling your energy back. Not to punish, not to play games, but because you've finally seen enough. Your heart may still care, but your spirit is tired, and so you withdraw. That withdrawal isn't about silence for the sake of silence. It's about clarity. It's the shift from trying to fix someone else's behavior to protecting your own peace. And that shift speaks louder than anything you could ever say. People notice when you stop chasing. They feel it when your energy is no longer wrapped around them. They begin to sense the absence of something they used to take for granted. Your presence, you see, when you were always there responding, initiating, supporting. They didn't have to think. They didn't have to reflect. Your availability became the background noise of their comfort. It was constant, predictable, and in that predictability, they stopped valuing what it meant. They stopped recognizing the effort behind your presence, the care in your messages, the meaning in your attention. But when you pull away, when you reclaim your energy and stop filling in the emotional gaps, you create space, and in that space, something happens. They begin to feel what life is like without your voice, your support, your love. That space forces them to think in ways they never had to when you were doing all the emotional labor. People don't always reflect when you speak. Sometimes they reflect when you stop speaking, when you no longer explain yourself, when you stop trying to get them to understand, when you leave them with the weight of their choices and the silence that follows. That silence becomes a mirror, one that shows them their actions more clearly than your words ever could. Withdrawal doesn't mean you don't care. Often, it means you've cared too much for too long. It means you've given grace, made excuses, and waited for change that never came. It means you've finally decided to stop hoping that your effort will create their growth. Because growth doesn't come from pressure, it comes from space. When you withdraw, you're no longer cushioning the consequences. You're no longer shielding them from what their behavior creates, and that absence can be jarring. It's not that they suddenly lose access to your voice, it's that they lose the version of you that once tried so hard to stay. The version that gave them endless chances, the version that explained the same thing 10 different ways just to be heard. That version disappears not out of malice but out of necessity, and maybe they reflect. Maybe they start to understand what you were trying to show them all along, or maybe they don't. Maybe the silence exposes not just who you are, but who they are, whether they were ready, whether they truly valued you, whether they were ever capable of meeting you where you stood. Your withdrawal is a revelation. It shines a light on dynamics they refused to see when you were still trying to make them see it. It becomes a pause in the noise where the truth gets louder. You gave them everything, and now, without your emotional presence, they're left to sit with the reality of what they didn't nurture. Sometimes that reflection leads to change, sometimes it leads to accountability, and other times it leads to nothing at all. But either way, your withdrawal has done its job. not because of the reaction it created in them, but because of the clarity it created in you. You start to see who shows up when you stop showing up first. You begin to see who truly values your energy, not just when it's given, but when it's gone. You learn to observe instead of overextend. You start letting silence reveal what words could not, and what you find in that silence tells you everything. Withdrawal is not weakness. It's not emotional coldness. It's maturity. It's knowing that sometimes the most powerful way to communicate your worth is to stop handing it over to people who don't know what to do with it. There comes a moment when you stop waiting for someone else to choose you. You stop hoping that their effort will match yours. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into the small spaces they offer you. And instead, you choose you, not because you no longer care, but because you finally do about yourself. Choosing yourself doesn't always look like a grand, bold statement. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's sitting in your own discomfort and deciding not to reach out. Sometimes it's walking away from a conversation that's going nowhere. Sometimes it's deleting the message you wanted to send, not because it wasn't honest, but because you know they still wouldn't understand. When you choose yourself, you start to prioritize peace over potential. You start to see that loving someone isn't enough if it costs you yourself, worth. You begin to measure connection by how it makes you feel, not how badly you want it to work. And you learn that staying in situations where you're constantly overlooked, underappreciated, or misunderstood isn't loyalty. It's self-abandonment. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop caring less about yourself than everyone else. It means you stop explaining your value and start living it. It means you stop bending your boundaries just to keep someone in your life, and instead you let them meet you where you stand, or not at all. That's where growth begins, in the moment you stop waiting for someone else's love to heal you, and you begin doing the work to heal yourself. Growth starts in the silence that follows your decision to walk away from what no longer aligns with who you're becoming. It's uncomfortable at first. You'll question yourself. You'll miss the familiarity of chaos. You'll feel the urge to go back just to feel something again. But you'll also feel a shift, a strength rising where there used to be a wound. You start building a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on someone else's behavior. You begin to take ownership of your choices, your emotions, your path, and that ownership changes everything. You begin setting boundaries not to control others, but to honor yourself. You speak up not to start a fight, but to stay true to what you feel. You stop over-explaining and you start observing. If no one has reminded you lately, you are not too much. You are not asking for too much, and choosing yourself is not selfish. It's necessary, because the more you honor your own value, the more the world will begin to reflect that back to you. And yes, choosing yourself might feel lonely at first. It might come with silence, with distance, with letting go of people who never really saw you. But what you'll gain in return is everything they could never give you: clarity, peace, self-respect, and growth that cannot be shaken. So don't be afraid to stand alone for a while, because the version of you that rises from that solitude will be unshakable, and the world won't just see it, they'll feel it, thank you,